Oh, it's great to have your company. You're listening to Life and Faith from the Centre for Public Christianity. My name's Simon Smart.
And I'm Natasha Moore.
Now, the Bible is the literary classic. It's the great publishing success story. It's still the case that each year the Bible is the biggest selling book around the world. 6 billion copies have been sold. And interestingly, since records have been kept, the Bible has been number one every year, except in 2007 when Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows topped the list with 44 million sales. Now, the latest figures for the Bible are staggering. It sold 30 million copies in 2009 alone. If you work that out, it's about 82,000 copies a day. But it's fair to ask, how many people in the West actually read it today? Plenty of people have it on their shelf, but you get the feeling that many of these Bibles are never actually opened.
Have you ever read any of the Bible?
No.
For school assignments, yes.
Yeah, I read it occasionally. Hear verses there sometimes.
Not at home, not my own Bible.
It's a children's Bible, so I've read a few chapters of it with the kids, yeah.
Well, today on Life and Faith, we're talking the Bible and asking the question, why should anyone bother reading it? We've talked about the Bible on Life and Faith before, and we made the point that no one can claim to be an educated Westerner until they've read the Bible. Even well-known atheists like Richard Dawkins and the late Christopher Hitchens have acknowledged this fact. But reading the Bible can be a hard sell these days. Someone who thinks reading the Bible is a good idea is John Dickson, fellow director here at CPX. He's in the studio. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me.
John, you wrote an article recently really encouraging people to give the Bible a go. Your challenge is 100 pages. We'll get to that in a minute, but first of all, the Bible is not exactly the most accessible body of work for people today. Would you agree that it can be quite hard going?
Yeah, it's totally weird. If you're not sort of a reader of the Bible and haven't really thought about these, Sunday school stories or whatever, it's weird, and it's not like a religious book. I mean, half of it's history. Then you got all these poems that jump out of nowhere, and you got this guy who tells stories, and it's from another time and place. But I reckon if you give it 100 pages, maybe with a few footnotes to help you bridge that cultural gap between us and when it was written, I think the payoff from reading the Bible is real.
Now, John, when you started writing about this recently, you talked about a similar experience that you had with another literary classic when you were first given the challenge of reading Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. Do you want to tell us about that?
You're grinning at me because you were the one to challenge me to do it. Until you came into my life, Simon, I had read one novel in my entire life.
To your shame.
To my great shame. But I used to boast, didn't I, that I was a non-fiction man. I deal with reality, and you were... Anyway, so you gave me 10 books that I had to read in order to be an educated person. One of them was Tale of Two Cities. And dutifully, one weekend, I got the copy in the Penguin Classic, opened it and thought, oh, well, you've got to do it. And there's that famous line that I already kind of knew, didn't know where it come from. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And I thought, oh, yeah, okay, I get this, yeah. And then, within a couple of pages, the sentences are so long, I didn't understand who the characters were. It was from another time and place, sort of flipping between London and Paris. There were historical details, and I pushed through, but to be honest, I did not like it. And I thought, I'm right, and Simon is wrong. Non-fiction is much better.
But something changed along the way, right?
I don't know exactly where, but maybe it was 100 pages in or more. I can remember having to go and do something because the time had come to go and do something on the weekend, and I didn't want to. I wanted to keep reading, and I thought, I'm hooked. I had come to actually like the weird sentence structures. The historical details were actually a little bit thrilling, and in my copy of Tale of Two Cities, it had footnotes where they were explaining the historical background of the French Revolution and all this, and I was absorbed in the whole thing, and actually I loved the story. The story was this amazing sort of redemptive narrative, and I was completely hooked, and I kept going with great gusto.
Welcome to the wonderful world of fiction.
I am a believer.
So what did this experience tell you in terms of the payoff of this kind of investment and pushing through?
Well, it suddenly struck me that some of the best, most important works of non-fiction and fiction, because I have read a lot of fiction since then, from Simon's List, they take a lot of work. They require something of you in order to get the payoff. And, I think the Bible is a bit like that. And I only sort of realised that having read a few of these classics. They can be difficult going, and you just got to push through in the hope that if they are a classic, they're going to be timeless in some sense and speak to you about ultimate things. That's certainly true of Dickens. It's certainly true of the Jane Austen novels that I've read, Tim Winton, Australian classic. It's certainly true of the Bible.
So, John, what would you say you've learned from your wayward past here?
Oh, you have taught me, Guru. Well, I think, I've learned never to mock a classic. And next time you come into my office with a list of books to read, I'm going to read it. I'm not going to be like that 15-year-old in the English lit class who goes, "Miss, Shakespeare's stupid." And Miss, she just looks at him smilingly, and you must have looked at me like that for so many years. And I'm never going to do that again. But, frankly, people do that with the Bible. They haven't really read it, at least not as an adult, not with their thinking cap on, not with footnotes to see what's going on. And they say the Bible's stupid, when really they should just push through and approach it as an adult. And I think the payoff is real.
To be honest, I mean, there are good things in it, but there's also a lot of bad things in it. So I don't know, I probably wouldn't say to read it as a...
I don't know if you should sit down for hours, but it's probably not a bad idea to know some of the stories. Like, it's a part of history anyway.
It's an inspirational book, of course. The Psalms are, for example, one of the oldest parts of the Bible, and they have been carried down from the Jewish tradition into the Christian tradition, among others. So yeah, people of all religions can benefit from that, sure.
I think there's some great humanity in the texts that need to be emphasised in our society currently.
You're listening to Life and Faith from the Centre for Public Christianity. We're talking to John Dickson about reading the Bible. Now, John, you made the point earlier that the most important and rewarding literary works often require something of us before we reap the benefits. That's certainly true of the classics of literature. You seem to think it's true of the Bible as well.
Yeah, but it's surely in the nature of a timeless work that it doesn't at first appear timely, because it's not written for us. And the thing I love about the Bible, really, is that it's got relevance in the capital R sense, not in the lowercase r sense. So it's not talking about, the latest thing that's happening in sport or fashion or whatever. And so it doesn't have this immediate sense that it's speaking to me about what I'm thinking about today. But it's almost the fact that it's not deliberately written for ancient Athens or modern Sydney, that it has this timeless dimension. The reason classics become classics, I think, is because they plug into things that are universal in humanity. And the ultimate example is the Bible. It's not the sort of thing where you can pick it up in the morning and go, "Oh, wow, that helps me choose, my wardrobe today." But it helps you navigate life and relationships. So its relevance is capital R.
So you want to make this jump, John, from this lesson you picked up in reading Dickens to calling everybody to give the Bible at least 100 pages. Tell us about that challenge.
Well, there are lots of people who think of themselves as educated Westerners who maybe they have read the Dickens and the Austens and so on, but they haven't read this book that lies behind so much of our literature and philosophy and ethics and culture and history and art and so on. And so even as an intellectual obligation, I reckon pick up the Bible, give it 100 pages, even if you hate it, just push through. And if you don't understand it, pick up a commentary and try and understand its context. Because I'm pretty sure that anyone who's just vaguely open-minded, who approaches the Bible, who pushes through maybe reading the Gospels at least, the Psalms, they'll find that there's stuff here that connects to the largest issues in life and connects with the most important cultural symbols in Western society.
So you're not saying start at page 1, Genesis chapter 1.
Well, if you're super game and you've got commitment levels that you can rely on, why not? But for most mere mortals, I say no. Start with the Gospels. In fact, make it simple. Start with the Gospel of Luke and the book of Psalms. And if you get through Luke, you may kick on to want to read John, and then you keep kicking on. But I think that everyone should read a Gospel at least once in their life, so why not Luke? And the Psalms, they've influenced our poetry and way of thinking, so I think they're a wonderful way. The Psalms are so beautiful because there's songs and cries of the heart. And so that emotional, not just the intellectual sense, can really be evoked.
Now, John, some people might think that your description of the Bible as being a classic is only the case because this is a book that was imposed upon the culture by the church when it was in a very powerful position.
I think that gets it completely the wrong way around. The Bible created the church, not really the other way around. Perhaps the best counter example to this criticism is the fact that half of the world's Bibles that are sold each year actually are in China, right? I mean, that's extraordinary. So it's 30 million a year, half of them in China. And in China, the Bible is not a recommended text. You know, it's so incredibly popular because the Chinese are finding something in it that is extraordinary. And that tells you, doesn't it, that this is not a Western book either. I mean, it never was a Western book, right, in the sense that it's a Middle Eastern book that powerfully influenced the West. But now it's gone full circle. It's gone into the East and is probably the most successful book in China today.
Yeah, well, some people have picked up the Bible and started to read it and found it speaks to them in ways they hadn't anticipated. I think of the actor David Suchet, who evidently sat in his hotel room a few years ago and started reading the book of Romans and found himself being more and more compelled by this text, and much to his surprise, eventually was convinced to become a Christian. You said that it can sometimes read the person reading the book. What do you mean by that?
I mean, when you read portions of the Bible, often, not every day, but it describes life in such a profound way, you think, how did it know that? And how did it know that about human nature that I sort of only stumbled across yesterday in a half thought when someone yelled at me on the bus, and yet here it is in the Bible explaining it. And so it feels like, I don't know, you walk into a cafe you've never been to before and you sit down and the waiter comes over with your double shot latte with one sugar and you go, how did you know that? I know. I think the Bible does have this spooky effect.
Can you tell us something, John, about what you've personally gained from reading the Bible?
Wow. Well, a good education, like reading Dickens. I actually came to faith through reading the Bible in the sense that my scripture teacher at school invited me and a whole bunch of my mates back to her home, which I guess you could never do now, for hamburgers, milkshakes and scones and Bible. And I wasn't that interested in the Bible, but I was interested in the food. But she read to us the Gospels Friday afternoon after Friday afternoon. So my access into the Bible, having never read a word of it, was the Gospel narrative. Can't remember which Gospel she read first. Maybe it was John or Luke, I don't know. But the figure of Jesus just leapt out of the page. And he was so extraordinary. I think in those early days as a 15 or 16-year-old, part of me thought he was like a superhero, and part of me thought he was like an anti-hero, and I didn't get that. So on the one hand, he's got this massive power, and on the other hand, he's, hanging out with the outcasts of his day, and then ultimately giving his life on a cross. I found him utterly captivating, and reading the narrative of Jesus, the gospel, the biography of Jesus, was my access into being a Christian from a family that never had church in its life. So, it gave me Jesus, it gave me an education, but, now I find I am still intellectually stimulated by the Bible. I try and read it every day, and there's always something there that I go, oh man, this is extraordinary stuff. So intellectually I'm stimulated. Culturally, I think it makes me informed, but personally I find, because it reads me, it exposes me, it enables me to live in God's world, God's way, because this is God's book.
Well, there's the challenge for everyone. Give the Bible a go. Well, at least 100 pages. Good to talk to you about that, John.
Thanks a lot.
See you next time on Life and Faith.